Good evening. Just loading up Inkscape. That's why I haven't started yet, but I'm going to be doing some logo design and flat design. I'm mostly talking this evening with, of course, obviously I'll be doing design, but I'll mostly be focusing on designing logos using flat design and designing icons and such. Like, I have some notes written as well, so I'm going to be following my notes this evening, not as impromptu as usual, but I hope to cover quite a bit of ground in that arena. Hopefully I can get through pretty quickly. I'm about to share this on social media and such because I didn't. So, well, I did share on Twitter before, but I haven't announced I'm live, so I'm going to do that and then we will jump in. So just give me a couple minutes and we'll get started. Alright, I am about ready to jump in. Just need to switch over to Inkscape now. Alright, it's loaded, so let us jump right in. Yeah, as I mentioned today, I'm going to be talking mostly about flat design, and I'm going to be focusing on designing logos and icons using flat design, which, believe it or not, was not really my cup of tea up until recently. I kind of didn't like it, to be honest, so it was something that I avoided using and avoided thinking about. I didn't really dig the whole idea, I guess, because for me, being that I'm an avid user of open source software and basically open source designs and such, like, I found that a lot of people were basically just producing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, and I really didn't like that. So my automatic response was to associate flat design with cookie cutter, and it doesn't have to be. Flat design is really and truly, if you will, a process and not something where you're just copying what other people have done. And it doesn't mean that it always is just something simple and basic, even though what I'm going to be covering today is going to be pretty simple and basic for the sake of being digestible. So what I'm going to actually do, I have some notes that I wrote, and I'm going to actually pull those up now. I may actually let you see my notes because they're pretty useful, I think. Okay, I'm not seeing them on this. Did I put them on the wrong server? I probably put them on the wrong server. So let me just grab my phone, because they're on my phone, and I'll copy them off of there. So just give me a minute. Oh, before I do that, let me... Oops, my headset keeps slipping. Having a little bit of a strange stream today. Anyway, yeah, let me just write down what we're going to be doing, and then I'm going to drop the notes in here. Oh, and I need to switch the music as well, because it just so happens that I'm using an add-on that stops autoplay. And I'm playing from a playlist this time. Still the same channel, Creators Lib on YouTube. They produce free music and sound effects to content creators, and just want to give them a quick shout out. Very useful channel. They produce mostly Afrobeats, so if you want to use Afrobeats in your streams, you can go check them out. I'll have the link in the description for this video when it's done. Well, I'll also post it in the chat shortly. Now, for those of you who wouldn't have seen the last time that I was using Inkscape to design something, the latest nightly builds now allow you to align directly on the canvas just by dragging, which is really cool. I believe Illustrator works like that, if I remember correctly, so that is something that should make Inkscape a little more palatable to those who are more accustomed to apps like Illustrator. I often hear people criticizing Inkscape for not being Illustrator, but as I pointed out in a tweet recently, it's not meant to be, and I don't want it to be either. I want Inkscape to be its own thing, because it is its own thing. It's just another tool. It's a little different, but, you know, a butter knife and a steak knife are not exactly the same thing, and they don't need to be. They do a different job. But anyway, that's just a side note. So, as I told you, I'm going to pull up the notes from on my phone. I thought I sent them across to my cloud server, but apparently I did not. So I'm just gonna type them for you, and then we will start some actual designing. So, first point that I have here, and this is basically to give you a rundown of how you can do your own designs. Freestyle first, refine, and iterate. So that's the first thing that we will do. Freestyle, then refine, then iterate. Okay? And I'll explain what that is shortly. By the way, I'm typing those bullet points by using Unicode characters, which is something that you can do on most operating systems. You can type in, if you're on Windows, I can't remember the shortcut key for that, but if you're on Linux, it's Control-Shift-U, and then you just type the Unicode number that you need, or the Unicode code, and then press enter. So that's how I'm typing those. Alright, so my next note was build using a predefined number of elements. And then, alright, let me just copy this instead of typing it over and over again. Of course, I made a bullet point. And then the next thing that we're going to do is keep something consistent. And I will explain all of these points shortly. After that, keep shadows consistent. Keep lighting consistent. Why isn't this pasting what I just copied? I don't know what just happened there. Alright, one sec, let me change this music again. I'm gonna need to open up this add-on and fix that issue because it should be all playing playlist. Alright, I think I fixed it. So back to the notes. Whoops. Alright, last thing that I was going to type here is that contrast is fine, but keep it within a certain range. And as I said, I'm going to explain all of these. So let's start with the first thing. We're going to freestyle and then we're going to iterate, as I mentioned. So, oh, I'm not, see, sorry, that's my fan. It's extremely hot here. I live in the tropics, and as you can imagine, with the way how things are going in the world with global warming, it is hot. So, my apologies for the wind in the microphone just now. That's just me trying to stop from boiling. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is freestyle, and a small note here, we're not going to use strokes. When I first started getting into flat design, which was when I was contributing to, I think it's the New Mix project, I was a little bit confused as to what they were talking about because I'm basically self-taught. And also, funny enough, this is a funny story that I'm about to share. When I saw no strokes, my brain immediately went to these calligraphic strokes. So they said no strokes in your designs, and I said no calligraphic strokes, go ahead. So I did a design and I actually had strokes in it, and they were actually talking about these strokes. not the calligraphic strokes. So just a small note on that. The reason we're not going to use strokes on our flat design is that strokes go on the outer edge of the object that you're doing, and sometimes the dimensions can be messed up by that. So the process I'm going to use, I'm not going to use strokes. We're going to use two circles to create the same effect, but I'm going to show you how you can actually achieve the effect that you would want. Say, like, if you want a stroke of like 6 pixels or whatever in diameter on top of the inner circle, I'm going to show you how to do that. And the cool thing is Inkscape actually allows you to do that with you can basically use a calculator in Inkscape, but I'm not going to do that this time because we already know you just have to add 6. But if I wanted to do that otherwise, like if I were doing a more complex thing, I could do this and it would figure out what it's supposed to do. So that's just a small note. I believe all GTK Plus applications support that. I can't remember offhand, but I do believe that's the case. Alright, so let me just make this outer circle 126 by 126. And I'm going to make it a lighter color. Well, I'm going to make it white one time, just make it white. Move it to the back. Let me just make sure that these are aligned. And then I'm going to duplicate this one and I'm going to make it dark. Did I select the right circle just now? I can't even tell. Okay, there we go. That's the one I wanted. So we're going to duplicate this, make it black, make it somewhat transparent. So like 36 or so, and then we're going to blur it. I think 8 should do the trick. Right, I probably need to make this, I need to make this a little more opaque. Ah, I didn't even notice that before, so thank you very much for that. I didn't know that you could go into the preferences and turn that off. So that's pretty cool. There's some features in Inkscape actually that I need to explore more because, as you can imagine, as a designer, you tend to get stuck in the features that you use every day and certain other things you just don't bother to look for. So there are like 1,000,001 features in Inkscape that I either don't know of or just haven't bothered to use. So that's a good one. Alright, I'm going to turn the blur up on this a bit more because it's not as visible as I wanted. I think 32 should do the trick. Then I'm going to turn this down some more. Alright, I think that's good there. I'm going to actually make this circle smaller too because I want this bounding, this outside circle to be a little bigger. So actually let me just do it from here one time instead of changing those. I'm going to make this 220. Right, that should do the trick. I would figure because Inkscape is pretty big, so I would be surprised if all the developers knew all the features. Even myself, I mean, and this is just referring to the CSS framework, I often forget my own features that I wrote, so I have to go back to my documentation. But the funny thing is, because I don't always document everything as I'm writing it, I don't always actually remember until I go to the code, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't know that this could do that. So I can relate to that. Alright, so next thing I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to import a background image and clip it to the inner circle. I think this should do the trick. This is going to be huge, so it might take a while to load. Okay, there it is. Holding shift and resizing. Alright, let me zoom back in. Alright, now the reason I'm using this is just because I basically want to have an image be part of our design, but it's not necessary. Alright, so there we go. And then I'm going to blur this quite a bit. I'm using the image basically for the randomness that it contains. That's one of the reasons I like nature. Nature is a bunch of organized randomness. Oh, thank you for stopping by, Martin, and thank you also for working on Inkscape. As soon as I'm able, I would love to be able to donate. I'm not able to do that as yet, but I definitely would love to donate to development because I really appreciate this app. It's very useful. So thank you very much for stopping by. It's an honor, actually. Now, the next thing that I have in my notes here is to build using a predefined number of elements, and when I say this to use a predefined number of elements, what I mean is each design that we iterate from this is going to use the same number of elements, or at least say, like, if we go with between a range of like 3 and 5 elements, that's the number that will keep consistent for every other design. So far I have 3 circles, and then I have this image, and the image I'm not going to count that as an element, so I'll just consider it 3 circles. But what I'm going to do is probably add like maybe another 2-3 elements inside of these circles to make up the actual icon. So in this case, I'm going to create kind of like a mountain and a sun. So for that, I'm going to add another circle. Put this somewhere around here. And then I'm going to add a square, well, rectangle really. Convert this to a path. Join these two together. Now actually I have a number of options that I could work with from here. I can use the Boolean operations to cut this from in here. Or I can just move these nodes up if I want to, which is actually what I'm going to do this time, because I don't really feel like copying anything and doing any operations. So I'm just going to move these up. Add a new node in between and pull this one down. Alright, put that to auto smooth, and there we go. So now we have a mountain and a sun, and we have a nice flat icon. And so far we've used, I believe, 5 elements. But I'm probably going to cap it at 6. So what I'm going to do is actually add another rectangle behind this. Alright, there we go. And then this rectangle, I'm actually going to make it dark and move it below so that it's not overlapping anything. Whoops. Alright, and I actually need to cut this one. Let me just make it a bit wider so that I have a good idea of where I'm cutting it. Duplicate. I'm actually going to end up having to duplicate this circle and do all my operations on it. So I'm going to duplicate this, release clip, delete this image, and then I'm going to use intersection, and there we go. So that's perfect. Now the thing about flat design, I'm not an expert in it, but one thing I can tell you is that you don't want to create the effect of having 3 dimensions. So basically, even though you can simulate a somewhat 3-dimensional look when you're doing a flat design, you want to simulate 2-dimensional, a 2-dimensional space, if you will. So nothing should look like even if it looks like it's overlapping the other, it should look like they've all been compressed into 2-dimensional space. So that even say if you have like an ocean, that ocean and whatever is sitting on it or sitting in front of it look like they're still within those same 2 dimensions at all times. So we can iterate from this, and let's say we wanted to add a boat. So I'm going to take this, group it, duplicate, and move it across here. I really like this snapping, by the way, in Inkscape. In the newer builds, it's really cool. Alright, so we're going to ungroup that. And this one now I'm going to reuse. Actually, yeah, you know what, let me just delete this node altogether. And then I'm going to align these two nodes together here, and then these two nodes here, align these as well. Right. And as you can notice, I'm going to need another object obviously to complete this. So as I would have mentioned in the first point, you freestyle first, you refine, and then you iterate. And then the second point is to build using a predefined number of elements. The first step actually will inform the second. So the first step basically tells us how many elements we're going to need for the basic design. Second step tells us how many elements we may need for a more complicated design, and then we can begin to kind of like narrow things down. Okay, so in order to actually make this look like a boat, I'm going to need to duplicate this object here and step our number of elements up by 1. I'm actually going to probably write that down somewhere so that we actually can keep track of how many elements we're using for each thing. So let me just move this into position. Good, there we go. I think that looks reasonable. What I'm also going to do is put the number of elements that we're working with below each icon. So let me see, it was 3 circles, then 3 other elements inside, so that's 6 for this one. Then we have 7 for this one. And I think usually a good number to work with in terms of the range of number of elements that you could have is around like 3. I wouldn't advise you to go above that. Like if you're working with a range of number of elements, don't go above say about 3 for the most part, because then you begin to open up the door to too much confusion in terms of your consistency. Oh, and by the way, even though this this particular stream is not part of the Humanality project, I'm using some of the principles that I would have touched on in that, which is design consistency, design commonality, and design diversity. Let me just pull that back up for you so you can actually see that. Right, so you have, as I said, consistency, commonality, and diversity. The diversity one is missing from this. Alright, here it is. I have the wrong image up. So yeah, the third thing is diversity, and obviously you're building upon consistency and commonality in terms of the elements you're using, and then you're diversifying. And then if you go back to the previous streams that I did on the Humanality project, you'll see how that can work in real life, where I use basically just circles for the most part as my primitives, and then created a whole bunch of different faces and even cats, dogs, etc. Well, I didn't really do the cat. No, I remember I didn't actually do the cat yet. I have to get back to that and actually finish doing the cat. But yeah, all that was a side point, but just to remind you, I'm working with the same principle. So back to where we were. What I'm going to do is actually try now and see if I'm going to step up or step down in terms of the number of elements that I work with for our designs. So I'm going to duplicate this, move it across here. Let me just align some stuff here for the time being. I like to keep my stuff organized, so if you see me stop in the middle of what I'm doing and start organizing, don't get scared or anything. That's just me. But it's a good thing to have in mind when you're designing, to keep your things organized, of course. Helps to keep everything clean. Even though your workspace in real life off of the computer may not always be as clean as your workspace on the computer, good to keep everything clean and stuff. Alright, with all that done, let me just make sure these are aligned as it should be. Oops. Just grouping everything up because what I'm about to do now is align all three of these and distribute them evenly. Oh wait, I forget Inkscape. You know what? I'm still in the old mindset of using the older version of Inkscape that doesn't do this to me automatically. So everything's kind of already aligned. It's just the distribution now that I need to be concerned about. Alright, so let me see. Something isn't right though in terms of the horizontal gaps. That's the one thing I'm concerned about now. Doesn't seem to be making them. There we go. Right, good. So now I'm going to group that and put everything in the center of the page. And there we go. So now, what should I put in this third icon? I'm not quite sure. But I want to keep that sun there in position for the time being. Or then again, maybe I'll remove that. Let me go with night instead of day. And I'll put something else instead of a boat. So for the time being, what I will actually do, duplicate this and create a moon. Now to prevent snapping, you can hold the shift key while you're moving any object and it allows you to move it freely. Just a side note. Alright, so now we have the sun turned into the moon, and now I'm going to add something else on the water. In fact, maybe instead of adding something else on the water, what I'll do, remove the boat and add a reflection. So for that, I'm going to utilize my graphics tablet. Which is being stubborn and doesn't want to move out of its position. Not really, just the cable was hooked up in something. Alright, that wasn't my best of lanes. Let me do that again. Alright. Now I'm going to simplify that. So that's Control L on the keyboard. Good, that should be good enough there. Now a small note, this wasn't in my original notes, but just a small note that came to mind. In flat design, blurs are okay, but just don't overdo it. As you would notice, I used a blur in the background here, which is an image. For those of you who would now be joining and didn't see that part, there's actually an image inside of here clipped to a circle, and the image itself is blurred. But I use that for the sake of randomness. Now, the reality is that if you're doing a flat design, you can do something like that, like, you know, you can have a blurred background or whatever as part of your design, but you typically don't want to blur elements that are supposed to make up part of the design. And it's not because that it's like a hard and fast rule, it's just that visually it might not necessarily translate as you want it to. So just a rule of thumb, avoid blurring, you know, unnecessarily at least. Alright, let me try drawing this as a freehand line because the calligraphic stroke, getting a little tongue twisted there, the calligraphic stroke did not come out exactly as I wanted it to. So I'm going to try doing this as a freehand line, see if it's a little cleaner. Looks a little bit cleaner, but I'm not so sure yet. I may actually need to go into the node editor and refine this a bit. But the reason why I decided to use a line this time too is I can actually change the thickness in a way that I cannot with the calligraphic strokes. Also, editing it will be a lot easier because it will be just individual nodes to move around. instead of having to fiddle with, you know, the sides and all that stuff. So let me jump into the node editor and clean this up a bit. By the way, if you're loving the music, it's from Creators Lib on YouTube. I'll be including a link to them in the description of this video. And I just remembered that I was supposed to drop it in the chat, but I didn't. So I will do that shortly, as soon as I finish fixing this line. Alright, I think this should do the trick. Just make it rounded on the ends. Oh, I need to fix this part here too. I didn't even realize that. And just add a new point there. And move this downward. There is a way to do this a little more cleanly, but for the time being, I'm not going to. Even though it's probably best if I do fix that. Probably fix it later. Alright, so this now I'm going to convert to a path. So go to path, stroke to path, and then make this white. And that can be our reflection. Let me flatten this a bit. Now typically this is just me, this is not a hard and fast rule, but I don't use like gradients and stuff in well, gradients I should say, in the primary elements of a flat design. So like if it's something that's going to be on the upper surface, if it were 3-dimensional, I typically would not use a gradient, but in this case I'm going to cheat my own rules and actually use a gradient for the sake of realism. Alright, now I'm going to just position this as I need it. Alright, so that should look a little bit more realistic now in terms of being a reflection on the sea. Yeah, there we go. So now we have 3 different icons, and it just so happens that this one ends up using 6 elements instead of 7. Because I would have deleted these 2 and then I added a new one. So I'm going to put this back to 6 instead of 7. Inkscape doesn't want me to select the text in here for some reason. I have to zoom in. There we go. Alright, so for now our range is still 2 numbers. I would have said earlier that I like to stick to around 3, but 2 is good as well. And this is one of the reasons why if say you were doing like an icon theme for instance, you would iterate with a few designs first before you jump into everything else. But we still managed to keep something consistent, and the something of course is that there's a sea or ocean, whatever you want to call it, in each of these designs. There's something in the corner, so you either have the sun or the moon to tell you that it's day or night related, and then you have the shadows are consistent because they kept the same shadow in each one, and contrast is fine but keep it within a certain range. So in this case what I decided to do is to avoid using too much contrast with the background for instance and the ocean by having everything within close range in terms of saturation. At least those elements are close in saturation. The rim of the icon is white and the internal elements are also white, So there's a great contrast between those, but you still need something to be visible, obviously. But you don't want to overdo it with contrast when you're doing flat design. That's just a general rule of thumb. As I said, these are not hard and fast rules. You can iterate as you need to, but just, for wisdom's sake, that's how you would do it. Now we've established basically how this is going to work, what I'm going to do is actually group all of these, move them to the side, and start adding some other icons using the principles that we would have just defined. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about using text as well effectively in like flat design, because you'll notice too the font that I use here is a sans serif font. That means that there are none of those sharp corners and stuff sticking off of anything. That's the Lato or Lato, however you choose to pronounce it. Pretty popular font used on the internet, used in design. I use it a lot, and it's if I remember correctly, it's open source as well. But typically, if you're doing flat design, you should also use a sans serif font because the two work together, and use nice spacing and stuff. In this case, I didn't space these letters, but I mean, you don't really need to worry too much about the content text, but like titles and such, you should have them nicely spaced so that readability is way up there, so to speak. Because flat design, at least this is just my opinion as a designer, flat design is best used for stuff like presentation of data and like stuff that is supposed to be easily legible. And even though you could combine it with, say, like a more fancy font, you might want to avoid using one that is, more or less like harder to read. You want to use something more legible. So I would avoid using any font that has like, if it is a more fancy font, like a handwriting font, I would avoid using something that has like sharp edges and stuff on it. Use something more flowing, but something that's still legible at the end of the day. But that's just a side note about text. Not gonna get too deep into that today. I'm gonna focus mostly on the design. So alright, we got these three. These give us a basis in terms of where we're gonna go from here. So now we can iterate on this a little bit more and create some more icons. So I'm gonna move these, duplicate these, and move these back up. These duplicates, of course. Now what I'm going to do with the duplicates is actually iterate even further by giving them different colors and such. I still need to fix the ocean, I just remembered that. So let me do that right away. Alright, so to fix this, what I'm going to do is just pull this down and then duplicate this. In fact, I don't need to duplicate it. Let me undo that. And I add a new circle and make it the same dimensions as that one originally. So for that, 110 by 110 should do the trick. Inkscape is being a little bit stubborn for some reason. Not sure if something decided to run in the background on the computer or something. Oops, wrong operation there. Right, there we go. What did I just click? Was it exclusion? Right, exclusion is the one I wanted. Okay, so if that fixed, what I can do is actually delete this one. Oops, let me ungroup first. Right, delete this one. Duplicate this. Move it across here. Alright, something is definitely up with Inkscape at this point, but I can't quite tell why it's misbehaving like this. clearly this doesn't want to move above this object. Not quite sure why. Ah well. What I'll do instead, delete you, since this wants to misbehave. You know, computers, how they do. Whenever you're trying to do something, computers find some way to be special. So we'll just ignore that and work with this icon as is. So let me just make sure everything's ungrouped. Gonna keep the sun in place. Oops, didn't mean to delete that. That was accidental. Alright, let me check here. Just give me a second, folks. I think something's probably running in the background, slowing down everything else. So just give me a second here. I can't seem to find any culprits causing Inkscape to misbehave, so it might just be Inkscape itself that's being a little special. But not to worry, Inkscape, the stream won't be going on for another hour, so you'll soon get a break. Alright, so as I said, what I want to do is add some color to this. So what I'm going to do is actually add a new circle. So this will actually take the number of objects up, or number of elements up, but instead of counting this as an extra element, I'm going to just consider this part of the background. I'm going to use purple this time. Now, not to worry, I'm not going to be losing the contrast from the background. What I'm actually going to do is use a blend mode so that this is actually blended into the background. So let's see, screen, we'll brighten it, overlay. Yeah, overlay should give me the nice effect that I want in terms of maintaining the contrast and the color to a certain degree. So I just need to adjust now the opacity and get the exact effect that I want. I think 65 should do the trick. And we're still going to count this as 7 objects because now this just becomes a part of the background. Now what should I add here? If anyone has any suggestions for me to add anything to these icons, you can go ahead and type that in the chat. I'm not quite sure what I want to add to this icon because I think it looks pretty cool as is, but I might add something else to it. Now, in terms of consistency, sometimes you can break your own rules. By the way, this is just another side note. So what you could do is remove the ocean, for instance. So let's say if I duplicate this, and let's say I wanted to do an app like Instagram, for instance, delete the ocean and add yeah, I think I'm actually gonna go with a circle instead of a rectangle. So let me make this 75 by 75, drop it somewhere around the center, and then I'm gonna move it down and across by the same amount. I'm going to duplicate this, resize it like that, and difference. Oops. Did I do the right thing? Right, difference. Yeah, there we go. Now I'm going to duplicate this. In fact, bad strategy. So what I'm going to do instead is actually turn the stroke on. This should do the trick. Now even these numbers I could keep consistent because I usually do that in most of my designs. So like the stroke that I use for the reflection on the other icon was 7 point something. I think it was 7.32 or something like that. Yeah, I could probably keep this consistent to that. Or I could break my own rule again and go with something else. But I think I'm going to stick with my original rule of 7.32. Even though something thicker may look nicer, it's good to have consistency. And the reason I say that, and I often advise people to do this when you're designing, consistency may not always be immediately obvious to your brain, as in your conscious mind, but it is something that you will notice even subconsciously. And consistency tends to basically, at least this is my opinion, it's not scientific, but this is my opinion based on observation, based on experience, etc. Consistency tends to produce the effect of basically feeling comfortable with whatever it is that you're looking at. And when I'm talking design or teaching design, I typically tend to tell people that you want to produce what I call comfort areas in the brain, and consistency is definitely one of them. So I'm going to keep to my own rule that I inadvertently established when I designed the first icon with a stroke, and keep to 7.32 as the thickness of that. And what I'm going to do, stroke to path, so that this actually becomes an editable path, and that should be that. What I'm going to do after that now, duplicate this again, duplicate it again. In fact, no, I don't need to duplicate again this time. Let me just make this a little smaller. I think around here should be good. And turn the fill off, turn the stroke on. 7.32, but this time now we're going to divide by 2. Right, that gives us exactly what we want. Now this is something I really like in Inkscape, that you can actually do that. It's really, really cool. And then I'm going to duplicate this circle, and I'm actually going to cut it in half. But watch how I do that. So let me turn the fill back on. And I also turn the stroke on because I want the full circle, of course. And start 360. Well, no, 180 should be the start. Then all I have to do is rotate this as soon as Inkscape allows me to actually select it. Thank you, Inkscape. Inkscape is being a little special today. Oh, another thing, let me put the ends back to being flat. Right, there we go. I just need to make sure that this is aligned correctly. Right. And then I can use difference. That should do the trick. Oops, pressed the wrong key there just now. Alright, let me resize this a bit so I get this to cut exactly as I want it to. Object, stroke to path. Let me see if these are 2 objects or 1. Just need to be sure of that. Yeah, they're 2 objects. So what I want to do now is combine these using union, and then I'm going to cut this one with that other one. So difference, right, there we go. Now there's a feature in Inkscape that I'm trying to remember if I have it correct. I believe it is break apart. No, not that one. I may need to look this up because I can't remember it offhand, but I remember there's a feature in Inkscape that allows you to cut 2 points or cut a path at 2 points, but I can't remember what it is offhand, so I may need to look that up. But I'm actually going to cheat this time since I don't have time to stop and look it up right now. Let me duplicate this. I actually just undid the operation that I did. What I'm going to do is cut this again. And then I'm going to use this one to cut it a second time internally. Kind of a roundabout method, but for the time being, since I don't feel like, well, not feel like, since I don't really have the time to stop and look it up, I'm gonna just use this method instead. But it just goes to show you there are multiple ways to approach any problem that you have and find a solution. So this should do the trick. Difference again. Oh wait. Let me see something here. Is stroke on? Yes, it is. I forgot to turn stroke to path for this one, so stroke to path. Difference. There we go. Perfect. I'm gonna clean this up now by just adding some nodes in between here, and then I'm going to delete the ones I don't need. Perfect. Alright, so let me just select up to here. Now the reason I did that in terms of adding those extra nodes was so that it would actually think that those areas are straighter, and then I could just delete without having to worry about it bending anything out of shape, basically. Alright, that looks relatively clean there. Don't think anyone should notice too much. Oops, I didn't mean to move that too far out of place. Now this doesn't really have to represent anything. I was going with the Instagram icon in mind and then iterating from that. So we have our own little app, whatever that app is. I'm going to change the color here as well. The cool thing about this is that we automatically get to keep within a certain range, as I mentioned, because I'm not really changing too much, so everything should remain pretty close in range to the original design. And this is how my usual strategy of stacking simplicity can really pay off, because instead of me having to basically reinvent the wheel each time, I'm just changing small parameters and getting a great deal of diversity using the same elements. Alright, so we're going to duplicate this icon now, move it over here. Let me just see how many objects I have used. Alright, should be 7 in each case. So there's 3 of these plus the background. So these are actually 6, are they? No. Yeah, I think it's still 7. I'm trying to remember where the fourth thing is, because I know there are 3 circles, and then there are 3 other elements, and there was a... Oh, you know what I forgot? I forgot that we removed the ocean, so it is 6. 6 elements in this case. I don't know how I pressed 5 just now, but somehow I did. Now let's say we wanted to have an icon that doesn't use the ocean, but it uses something else in the background. You can still keep within the range of the number of elements that you're supposed to have. Just need to plan what you're going to do beforehand. So in this case, what I'm going to do is add some grass, and we know that at this point now we would have removed the ocean, so this is down to 6 elements, and then we just removed all the other elements. So let's see, this would be down to, I believe it's 3 circles and then the sun. Sorry, so let's call it 4 elements for this one. So now we have room to add up to 3. So in this case, I'm going to add some grass, and how I'm going to do that is actually duplicate the ocean from this one, move it over here, and then I'm going to add some rectangles. Well, I'm going to add 1 rectangle and then turn this into the blades of grass that we're going to have. So object to path. You know, it's kind of funny. I opened Facebook and forgot to share the stream on there. So I'm about to do that, but everyone on Facebook will have to just watch this video from the beginning because they missed everything. My apologies, Facebook people. I completely forgot to inform you. Alright, so while that loads in the background, let me just complete what I was doing over here. I'm going to select the color from the ocean for now. Let me turn on fill and stroke again and turn off stroke. Right. And now I can duplicate this a number of times. Move this last one over to here. I'm going to learn some tricks to trade today. So select all of these, go to align and distribute them all so that the horizontal gaps between them are equal, and there you go. Free grass. Didn't even have to position all of those individually. Now if I want, I can make even more room between them, so I can move this over to the end here. Move this one over to this edge. Just make sure that they don't overlap the outer circle. Select everything and use that same method again, and there you go. I'm going to flatten them a little bit because I don't want it to be too high. Alright, let me hold shift. Good, so that's our grass. And if you want, you can keep the consistency by having the grass be the same color as the ocean. But in this case, I don't actually want that. So what I'm going to do is group all of these and then give them a new color. Of course, this goes back to our first point here, which was to freestyle, refine, and iterate. Let me take out, well, yeah, I'm going to leave the first there. Well, then, instead of putting a comma here, let me put a colon so that you know, or a semicolon, sorry, so you know that these two can be repeated over and over and over again. Oops, selected the wrong thing just now. Alright, so the color that we're going to use here instead of white, because white is obviously not going to be ideal, I'm going to use a lighter gray for the grass this time. Not too far off from the original. And then this background color of course needs to change because you need to maintain a degree of contrast that's recognizable. I think this one should do the trick. Alright, so now we're up to 5 elements. It's kind of hard to see that this text when it's so small. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to add to this grass. Probably... I know what I'll do. I'll actually put another element. So it'll be made up of 2 first, and then I'm going to combine them into 1. I don't know why they went below that instead of above it. So let me draw them outside of this and then combine them from there. In fact, let me make it 3 instead of 1. I mean 3 instead of 2. But we're going to combine all these into one thing using union. Simplify. I just pressed the wrong key there again. Alright, simplify. And then we can move this into position. Why is this acting like if it's on another layer? Not quite sure what's up with that. Ah, I see what happened. Somehow that got grouped. I don't know how that happened. Alright, so then we just resize this. And we're going to make this white so that it stands out. Right, and now we have an icon for grass. So we can have a mountain with the ocean in the background. We have a boat on the sea. We have a nighttime icon. We have whatever this is supposed to be. Maybe fruit or something. Then we have here the sea by itself with the sun in the background. And then we have a nighttime scene with some grass. This is up to 6 elements, by the way. So we've managed to remain consistent. We've managed to have commonality. So there are elements in common between all of these different designs. And we have managed to produce diversity. And we have up to 6 icons now, doing pretty good. I think that's pretty cool. I'm probably going to call it, well, not call it quits, but I'm going to cut it short here in terms of actually designing these icons. I may revisit this project in the future. Who knows, I may actually build an icon theme live on stream and share it with you for free, or put it in my store, whichever I choose to do. I probably will be using these on some t-shirts and stuff though, because I like them. They were impromptu, but they look pretty good, so I may make these available in that format. But what we are going to do is actually turn this into something a little more presentable and exciting. So let me just arrange all of our elements and then turn this here into an infographic. Okay? So you get a little bonus content before I log off this stream. Facebook fam, I still haven't shared yet. My apologies. Alright, I'm writing the post right away. Join me on Twitch. Doing a stream about flat design. Okay, so back to this here. I'm actually gonna move these numbers off the side here for a moment because I'm gonna put them back in place, but I need to arrange the icons first. You're getting a little bit of a glimpse into what a designer's life looks like, and you should probably also begin to see why designers charge so much money if you're not a designer yourself. Because it's a lot of work sitting and arranging and fixing and doing all sorts of stuff before you actually produce that final design. Sometimes you draw what looks to someone else like a circle, and they didn't see the number of times that you had to sit, iterate, delete, try again, delete, and then eventually come up with a circle and say, alright, this works. And then you turn and say, alright, now give me $10,000. And the person's like, what? But it's because you just had to do so much to get that circle. So yeah, that's just a little note there, or a plug for us designers. Oops. I'm not sure what just happened there. Somehow I just switched workspaces by accident. I hope that did not come out on stream. Okay, it did come out on stream. I just switched workspaces by accident. I don't know how GNOME Shell just figured I was trying to do that, but it did. So yeah, my apologies. Alright, good. So now all of our icons are in the positions that I want them to be in. I'm going to resize this whole set together as soon as Inkscape decides to actually work with me. Thank you, Inkscape, being a little sluggish today. Alright, let's give this text a little bit of love. So first of all, word spacing, we're going to work on that. Alright, 5 is a bit much, so let's go with more like 2. Right, and then letter spacing, 1.35. or maybe less than that. Let's see. Yeah. Alright, let's bring this down a bit too. Alright, let's give this page a nice background. So I'm going to lock this layer, go to the bottom layer, and add a rectangle, 1024 by 768. That's my usual page size. I think that should do the trick in terms of color. Now, it's no hard and fast rule, but I find that typically with flat design, the modern trend is to use like paler colors and sometimes more muted colors. So just to keep with modern trends, I would advise doing that. But if you want to go your own way, I'm more of my own person that's in that sense too. So if you want to go your own way, of course you can branch off from that. But if you really want to catch audiences, try to stick at least close enough to what people are accustomed to. If not, sometimes you can lose people. Just a small note. Alright, putting this as normal is probably not going to work, so I'm going to duplicate that to make it look a little more bold and opaque. And now for some fancy lines here. Don't actually serve any purpose other than looking good. I just had an idea. Actually, what I'm going to do is give this a slight shadow as well. And I'm putting it to one side. The icons don't have lighting on one side. They're basically, the lighting is facing the front, or I should say facing the back, because it's coming from the front face to the back. But for the line, I'm going to put the shadow to one side so that the lighting is coming from where the text is. Alright, I think that looks good enough there. And now for another line underneath this. And just to be stylish, I didn't put it all the way across here, and I put it just beyond that. Now these are some of the things you can use as tricks sometimes to make things look a little cooler. Just, you know, like go outside the box a bit. When I'm teaching design, I call that particular thing the comfort of novelty, because novelty is another thing that makes your brain feel comfortable, and basically it's one of the reasons why you think that things look cool. So like take for instance, you'll see sometimes like sports car manufacturers will put say like an exhaust on one side, or not even an exhaust, like a vent for instance on one side of the car's hood, as opposed to making it completely symmetrical. It's because symmetry basically plays on your brain to make you think that it looks even cooler. Oops. I forgot that those were not grouped. Same mistake again. I'm going to use a trick here, which is that I've duplicated the line, and I'm going to move it, well, resize it so that it's not the full width of the other line, and then I'm going to blur it. What I'm also going to do is to actually convert this to a path and join these end nodes together. Well, not join them together, sorry. I'm going to actually insert a new one and then move that outward from there. So let me, right, add a new node and then move this down this way. Right, then add another one here and do the same thing. Now what that does is give us the effect of light coming across this line at some point. You can resize that as you need to determine where the light falls. Another little trick of the trade. I might cover doing like glass and other effects like that, like glass text or frosty text in a future stream. I was planning to do that actually today and then changed my mind. Interesting, I did not even realize that both the upper and lower icons have the same number of elements in them. Or at least most of them did. Or did that change? Let me double check again. I know this one has 7, this one doesn't, because this is missing something. So yeah, it wasn't as I thought. It's just I just realized I had 6, 7, and 6 up and down, and I was wondering, wait, did I actually inadvertently produce that? But no, I didn't. Small little overthinker moment there just now. Alright, so this has 6. This one has... I think this actually has 5, does it? You see grass, the... Oh yeah, this has 6 too. Right, I forget the grass is separate from the background, so duplicate. Okay, so we did end up with 3 numbers inadvertently. So this one actually has how many? The sun and the sea are extra on top of the 3 elements of the background. So this is 5. So I did end up with 3 numbers, just not consecutive numbers, but that's fine. At least we still kept consistency intact. Just doing a little self-assessment out loud, by the way. Oops, I thought I duplicated, I copied. Alright, good. Now the next step, just to add a note for what these numbers are for. Right, just gonna reposition this slightly, and I think that should be almost everything at least. Still have to add my website and my name. ago I had turned off snapping. I'm going to use a different font this time for the website because I like a more fancy font for that. So this should do the trick. Alexander. In my opinion, Alexander is one of those fonts that kind of hits the sweet spot between a serif and sans serif font. And it still happens to be slightly cursive as well. It doesn't actually, the letters don't actually touch, but still. Inkscape is definitely misbehaving at this point, so I'm soon done, but I'm soon gonna have to close it so it doesn't crash. I think the memory may be getting a little full. Alright, that's about it. Not sure what word it was that I called there just now. That's about it. I'm gonna call it quits here and export this image and make it available if you want to use it as a wallpaper or a reminder. But I will probably get back to this in a future stream. I'm working on a streaming schedule and I'm planning to add some more days, just so you know. But nothing is set in stone yet, so just be on the listen out to, to find out when things happen and how things play out. But I do have a tentative schedule in place, so next week will be a CSS stream again. I'm not sure what I'm going to be covering in that particular stream, but I do have some previous projects that I want to complete and some that I'll be continuing, just going forward as an ongoing thing. So you can look out for that. I'll be dropping some HTML/CSS/JS templates in the relatively near future, so stay tuned for that, and also Inkscape tutorials. But the rest is a toss-up in terms of how much time I have and in terms of what I get around to. So just stay, following me and stuff. You'll figure it out. You'll find out what's happening. You can subscribe to me on Twitch if you haven't already. You can subscribe to me on YouTube, same handle, Roland Itzor. You can subscribe to me on well, I don't think there's anything else to subscribe on, but you can follow me on Twitter as well at the same handle. All of that information is on my website, and you can look for my new streaming page to launch soon. I'll be redesigning that to make it more accessible and useful. So if you go to my website, just bookmark the streaming page, and you can find out all my information and stuff from there. So until next time, I'm Roland Taylor, aka Roland X, or you can find me every week on Twitch at 5:30 Eastern Time. I cover design from CSS to Inkscape to pretty much anything open source, and I hope in the near future to get to a little bit of gaming as well. So yeah, tell a friend, tell your dog, tell your cat, tell your fish, especially tell your chickens, because I like chickens, to watch me on Twitch and subscribe to me on YouTube and such like. So until next time, see you later.